Hello, I'm Attorney Todd Leneve. Welcome to West Virginia Gun Law. Today I want to take a few minutes and talk with you about what your rights are when it comes to protecting your property. Stick around. A few weeks ago I did a video on self-defense, which applied to defending yourself or other people against a threat of physical attack. I wanted to also follow up on that video now and talk about the right to defend property, things, stuff, under West Virginia law and how that would apply to you. So let's begin from the premise that West Virginia law does not recognize the right to use force in protection of things, any level of force. Some states do allow the use of force to protect your property, up to and including deadly force if need be. But under our law, we do not have the right to use force to protect stuff. So where this comes into play is perhaps the context of you're sitting at home one night, you hear a noise outside, you look out the window, and maybe you see somebody rummaging through a detached garage or a shed, an outbuilding, something like that on your property. What do? Well, the first thought ought to be, let me make a phone call to 911 so that the police know that somebody's here and that I need assistance. However, sometimes you have a shortage of officers on a given shift, or they may be tied up with other things, and you're going to be way down the totem pole in terms of priority when they deal with that issue. So what are your rights? Well, first and foremost, I'm a firm believer that if you can avoid a conflict, if you can avoid a fight, you ought to avoid it. The possibility of bad things happening from a one-on-one conflict arise significantly when you decide to get involved in that conflict. If you can avoid it, obviously those problems are not likely to arise. The reality is that most of us are going to have insurance of some sort that covers the things that we're talking about here, and we'll be able to make a claim and try to deal with it through that means. It's also important if you choose not to confront somebody, and again, I usually recommend that you don't, but if you would choose not to confront the person, try and observe everything you can. Try and get a description, try and see what kind of vehicle they were in, try to get a license plate if you're able, see which way they went, and try to pass all that information on to the 911 operator so that the police have a better chance of being able to accurately identify who the people were that were on your property. I know that that's not always practical, especially if you live out in the country. It's sometimes going to be over long before the police would ever be able to arrive. And so there are instances where you may decide, hey, I need to try to stop this, prevent it from happening, and see if I can avoid the loss of my property. And listen, I understand. We work hard for the things that we have. Nobody wants somebody else to come in and take our things or deprive us of stuff that we've put our time, effort, sweat, blood, money, tears into so that we could have them. So I do understand that desire to stop this kind of activity. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with stepping out of your home and shouting at the person, hey, stop, get out of here, I see you, I've got cameras, whatever the case may be, something to try to get them off track with what it is that they're doing. You do have a right as well to protect your property from trespassing, not just your home, but outbuildings, other buildings or places you control, as well as the land itself. Now, trespassing is typically a little bit different from somebody who's there trying to steal something. But under our law, you do have the right to eject a trespasser using any force that's necessary in order to gain compliance. But you cannot go over the top. If you exceed what might be reasonable force for the situation, you could subject yourself to criminal penalty for having done too much, for having gone too far to eject that person. But if somebody hears you yell at them, hey, get out of here, and they decide that they're going to get out of there, then you're good and the situation is over, it's done, and hopefully there's no more problem to deal with. However, if they refuse to leave, and at that point perhaps confront you, now we're suddenly seeing a shift from protection of property and things to a protection of self, because that person who was first looking to take my stuff is now looking towards me and saying, hey, you're in the way of my objective here. And if they change that focus to you, now we're back to that prior video about the law of self-defense and all the different considerations that you have to take into account. But the underlying point of the video here today is to illustrate that we cannot use force to protect things. And as frustrating as that can be, that's what the law is right now. I'd strongly encourage everybody to get in touch with the legislator that represents your area and talk with them about this and say, hey, we've got a lot of great states around the country that have force laws when it comes to the protection of private property. Why don't we look at some of those and see if we can't model some legislation here in West Virginia that allows us the same right to protect our things as we have to protect ourselves. And I think that's an important step. I think it's an important part of making this state just a little bit better than what it already is, by giving us that leeway, that legal entitlement to take care of our things with reasonable levels of force, whatever the situation may dictate. But again, please understand that as of right now, you can't use force to protect your stuff. So in other words, you can't go shoot somebody because they're trying to steal your vehicle, or trying to steal your tractor, your riding mower, your things out of your tool shed. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to go beat them with a shovel, even though that may be the thing that you find yourself most compelled to want to do. The law just doesn't allow that right now. But you may encounter them if you choose to do so, and if you're going to encounter somebody, I encourage you to do so from a standpoint of being able to protect yourself against any circumstance that might develop out of that encounter. What am I saying? Well, if you have a firearm, carry a firearm. I would suggest that you not go out pointing it at the person, have it holstered or have it slung if it's a rifle, a long gun of some sort, but be prepared just in case the focus of that thief turns into now wanting to become an assailant against you instead of just taking your stuff. But where you may run into problems is law enforcement seeing that you going out there with a firearm constituted an escalation of the event. I disagree completely with that concept, because the reality is you're going out there to simply protect yourself, to protect your things, and that in protecting those things you are watching out for yourself by having a means to defend yourself. And we have the right to defend ourselves. We have the right to prepare ourselves to be able to defend in the event that somebody would come after us and turn from thief to assailant. But understand as well that we live in a day and age when we've gotten soft as a society, and too often the people who were the ones who were wrong in the first place end up being the ones that the law protects. And it's incredibly frustrating, because you're going to have law officers, you're going to have prosecutors, judicial officers, even juries sometimes that will look at your actions and say, well, you went to the threat. Why did you go to the threat? You could have stayed in your home, you could have called 911, and you could have let the police deal with it. Well, again, as we've said, the police may not be available to deal with it. And that means that we've got to suffer the indignity of losing our things to a lowlife who feels like they need them more than we need them. And that's not right, it's not fair. But we have to be sensitive to the fact that our society right now looks differently at those who help themselves. And we do have some level of risk if we take that step to help ourselves by protecting our things. What's the right thing to do? It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. And it's a decision that you're going to have to make if you ever find yourself in that scenario. But understand that the law does provide some protection to you in the event you are simply trying to eject a trespasser. But when we're talking about confronting a thief, it could be a whole different story, the way the law looks at it, the way the police interpret it, and the way ultimately a jury may see it if your case has to go that far. I know this is a complex issue, and frankly it's kind of a frustrating issue. So again, I encourage you, talk to your legislators, see if we can't get something done to clarify the law in this state so that we can join the ranks of a number of other states that have similar laws that do allow the use of force to protect our things. And maybe we can make some positive change here. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I'd really appreciate having your subscription, and I'm honored by the people who've joined already, and I look forward to continuing to put out videos on topics that are important to West Virginia gun owners, property owners, people who just want to take care of themselves and their families. If you like this video, please hit that like button, share it with others, and please, let's get the information out, because these are topics that I think are important to everybody, that everybody in the state ought to know about, so that we can better protect ourselves and those around us. I appreciate you spending the time with me today. Look forward to seeing the next video, and until then, take care.